Welcome everyone to Coaching in Session. This is going to be our second episode of the group edition. And today we're going to be bringing on a men panel. So our first group was all ladies, and now we're going to be bringing it in with the men. So we're going to be having a great episode today. So you're going to want to stay tuned to that. So let's bring into that group right now. My first person that I'm going to be introducing is Ted Phaeton. Ted, if you can, introduce yourself to the world.
Michael, thank you. And I appreciate being selected to be on the panel. My name's Ted Phaeton. By night, because I wake up at 2 a.m., I'm a morning meteorologist here in Charlotte, North Carolina. But my true passion by day is the podcast that I host and the men's networking and empowerment group that I have called The Modern Man. And the mission is to connect men in pursuit of their potential. We do that by embracing discomfort, cultivating community, putting wind in each other's sails, and doing our best to elevate all areas of our lives. I'm excited to share some of my thoughts, some of my experiences, lessons, and of course, the vision and goal along the way. And of course, you can follow everything you need at themodernmanpodcast.com, or you could just follow us on social at The Modern Man Podcast. Thanks again, Michael.
Perfect. Next, but not least, is going to be Antwaun Thompson.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity. Honored to be here with the other two great gentlemen. My name is Antwaun Thompson. I am a youth coach, mentor, and empowerment coach. I run a nonprofit, JLT Fieldhouse, a basketball coaching and mentoring organization. Also have an online mentoring academy, Coach T's Corner, and it's designed to educate, support, and inspire the next generation of leaders, which are our youth, by teaching them the soft skills that are not being taught in schools and are very important for them to be successful beyond their educational years. And I'm honored to be here. I'm also a podcast host. Developing Tomorrow's Leaders is my podcast. And just yesterday, I launched the second podcast with a fellow youth empowerment and leadership coach, Keith Senzer, and it's called Teen Speak, Empowering Today's Youth. And I'm honored to be here. And Coach T's Corner is my website where you can find out all of the other activities and programs that we have. And honored to be here. Thank you, Michael.
Congratulations on your second podcast. I'm getting ready to launch my second one too. So it's a lot of work. I know that. And the work that you do is not to be missed because you have put love and passion. You're always giving me great guests to come on to my podcast. So I definitely appreciate that. My next guest, don't let the junior fool because he's the big dog in the house. This could be Ralph Graves Jr.
I'm far from the big dog. After hearing these two other brothers, these gentlemen speak, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't even know why I'm here. This must be some sort of mistake. But my name is Ralph Graves Jr. I'm an author. I have a book out called Unstoppable: 7 Universal Laws That Have Changed the Way That You Pursue Success. I'm a retired police officer. I was a sergeant for 20 years in a New Jersey Police Department. I currently pastor a church called the Cornerstone Community Church. I've been doing that about 17 years now. Husband, father, grandfather. I am a John Maxwell leadership speaker, trainer, and coach with the John Maxwell team. A lot of things going on, but my passion is leadership. My passion is, I like these other men, really pouring into men, because I think a lot of times we kind of forget what being a man is all about and what's required of us as men. And so I'm just glad to be here and hang out with you guys for a little while. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Of course. And we're going to be talking about all that because you are right. We are in an interesting time when being a man is looked at in a different light. It's not as simple as, okay, well, you're going to be a traditional man, you're going to protect and you're going to provide. That is not being taught anymore. We have so many bad examples of what a man is or what a man can be or should be. They have a misconception of what a man is. And I'm not sure if anyone saw the Matt Walsh documentary of What is a Woman? Well, no one can figure out what a woman is. Do we know what a man is? So we're going to dive deep into that right now. We're going to define what a man is, and we're going to start with Ted. You're going to lead us off. What is the definition of a man?
Oh, man, put me in the hot seat. I have a lot of experience with this question because the original mission and vision of the modern man was defining what it means to be a man. And the more I thought about it and the more I spoke to other brothers and other people and other men, I realized that it's a living, breathing definition, right? It isn't necessarily one that I think everyone puts the same credence on. Everybody has their own definition of a man. And that's why I lean into modern man, because I think it's being adaptable. Being a man is being able to hold down the fort when necessary, understanding when strength might be needed, when grace might be needed. Also learning to tap into your emotions and how to express those in certain times. I haven't said anything about anatomy here because I found that when you just focus on the anatomy of it, there's still so many things about a man that's missing. There's so many things about what we would expect of a man that goes beyond just the anatomy and the sperm donation of having a child, right? I think being a man is something that's very much intrinsic, something that we become. I think men are created, not born. It's definitely a journey that I'm currently on, trying to find the definition of. So for me, it's something that's molding, something that's growing and continuing to mature, as I'm sure Antwaun and Ralph can both probably attest to as well.
So for me, when I think about what a man is, I think about my age and when I was raised and what I was taught when I was raised. I was born in 1964. You know, the world's a lot different than it is now. And then when I look at what I do now, I'm trying to develop the next generation of men. So obviously, my interpretation of a man has changed over the years, understanding what was important then versus what's important now. And I think Ted made a great point that it's ever evolving. And for me as a leader, that's what happened for me, because growing up, it was all about being a provider, being a protector. That's the way I was taught growing up. And now at 58 years old, I see myself going back and being a kid, trying to teach kids what a man is supposed to be today, which to your point, Michael, you mentioned is a lot different than it was before. And Ralph, I'd love to hear your take on that.
You know, when I left the house today, I told my wife we'll be talking about it. I said, honey, I said, pray that I don't get in trouble out the box. She said, think about it before you speak. I was born in, you said 64, I was born in 68. First of all, so we're all in the same, I know Ted's much younger than Antwaun and myself. First of all, if you ask me what is a man, well, I think the first requirement of being a man is, first of all, my definition is you have to be a male first. Now, every male doesn't become a man, but every man must be a male. And so first thing is a male first. Secondly, I was born to a man, raised by a man, protector, leader, responsibility, owns his responsibility. Real leadership, you own your own stuff. You're a provider at times, a protector at times. You know how to love. You're gentle at times. You know what love is. You take the time to become a communicator with those in your care and even outside of your care. And I think that term manhood comes with great responsibility, and not every male is a man. But again, I believe every man must first begin as a male, and you will grow. And like Brother Ted said down there, you grow into it. You learn what it is. You have to apply these principles. You have to have values and guidelines. And, that's, to me, that's what authentic manhood is. And started out off the bat, I told you guys I'm a believer. I pastor a church. I believe that there's something to being an authentic Christian man as well, even in, America, and Black America, white America, whatever you want to call it. But to me, that's what a man is. That's what a man is.
Well, if I can interject here, I just wanted to add, Ralph, to you, because you mentioned something and it popped in my head. I was also raised by a United States Marine.
Yes, sir.
I served 30 years in the Marine
Yes,
Corps.
Sir.
Served 2 tours of Vietnam. So you can understand what morals and values were instilled in my brothers and I from the jump street. So you talk about protection,
That's right.
responsibility, discipline.
Yeah.
That's the part of manhood that I still try to pass forward.
Yeah.
The discipline, the responsibility, accountability.
Yeah.
That's really important.
You see that flag behind me? That was my daddy. So I'm a military kid too. You see that flag behind me? So when you're raised and back when the wholeness of the family was together, when you're raised like that, you come up with different values and understand what your roles are, and this is what I try to pour into some young men who may not have had the opportunities, Antwaun, of being raised by a strong, not toxic, but a strong man.
Right.
In the home. You say that now, it's all of a sudden it's toxic. No, not because, every time I fell down, my dad ain't picked me up. He said, boy, you got to get up, but now that's toxic now. But that's the way I raised myself.
I'm going to get real personal here because I have experience with that too. I just had my son 2022 in June. So
Congratulations.
First kid, thank you. I am very aware of all the difficulties he has to go through in his life. A lot of kids are being babied today. I was a teacher and I saw that firsthand. Moms would just take their kids and say, okay, I'm going to fight for my son or my daughter, whoever. And that child learns, well, mom is going to fight for me, right? So they don't have to learn how to fight. They don't have to learn how to stand up. They don't have to learn morals or values or beliefs. They just follow blindly. And that is something that's going to be a detriment to most men because if they don't know how to, I guess, reach into their power, they're going to be pushed and pulled in any which way the world is going to vie for them. And so what I do with a lot of young men, and then even men who are in high school and going off into college, I tell them to be critical thinkers. I tell them to challenge the status quo, because there's going to be a lot of people who tell you that you can't do something in your life. And if you have always had mom or dad fight for you, guess what? They're going to be pushed and pulled because they're going to be waiting for someone to come save them. And not every day someone's going to come save them. So they have to learn how to fight. And it's not so much physically fighting, right? Oh, if someone talks bad about me, I'm going to punch them in the face. We don't have to go that low. Right. We can know when to act. We can know when to react. It's a great saying. A warrior knows when to act, but a fool always knows to react. So do we react or do we act? And I think most men, they are very reactive nowadays. So they're very foolish. They have that foolish mentality where they would rather defend something that they don't even understand. Oh, I'm a man. This is my pride. This is my ego. And that kind of pushes them along. And they finally get to a point where it's now toxic masculinity, because they're doing what they think is right. But in reality, the values are kind of skewed. Antwaun, what's your take on that?
No, I think you're 100% right. I started smiling because currently I coach 7th and 8th grade boys, and have been doing it for 11 years, for 10 years. And what you just described is what I see actually growing every year. And it's a lack of responsibility, accountability. I mentioned right before we came on camera, and I'll mention again, I've played 6 game practice for 3 weeks for that. I've had only 2 practices where all the players have been there. So where's the accountability? Where's the responsibility? So how can you achieve success when you're not committed to being consistently there and being present? And then the other part, you talking about, with your son, you're going through so much. And Ralph can attest to this, as you say, you have behind you a flag straight across from me. I have one of my dad's uniforms in a frame across from me. But on top of that, I have a stack of letters that we hand wrote to each other over the years when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, 14, 15. And if I could share really quick, there's one that I always share with people. I was having girl problems while he was overseas in Okinawa one time. I wrote him a letter, saying, hey, this is what I got going on. And the advice he gave me, it wasn't, like, oh, you just said everything. He just asked me questions. He said, hey, what do you think? Just because you got a car and a job, girls just going to come flocking? They want you to show them respect and so on and so forth. But I share that with you, talk to you about the kind of man that raised me. And I think it kind of goes back to your point. But, Ted, we've kind of held you in quiet here for a while, so we'd love for you to chime in. I don't want you to fall asleep on us.
No, absolutely. No, I'm very much engaged, and I like to listen because, hey, if you talk the most in the room, you learn the least in the room. So, and part of that is what I think on this topic is what's kind of running rampant is fragility amongst young men, because whether it be the lack of the father in the household, whether it be these participation trophies, which are not going to be allowed in our household. My wife and I have discussed that, and we agree on that. But the fragility, and Antwaun and Ralph, you both have mentioned the relationship with your father. And I do think that an authority figure at a young age is very, very important to the development of a man. In terms of my father teaching me when I had to stick to a commitment that I made, right? Or told me that, okay, right now, doesn't matter how you feel, you have to stick to this obligation. But also knew when to be nurturing, when to give a little smirk. And also, I wrote down something you said before, Ralph, because you mentioned about a man being made, and I think it's so true. And the question is, who bestows that manhood upon that young boy, right? Yeah. Who passes on the right of masculinity onto that young boy? Yeah. The rite of passage, the reason why they were so dangerous was because there had to be a level of danger, right? And as young boys, there's so many that are pretending to be hard, and because they're hoping to be hard when they're really fragile, because they haven't truly been tested yet in life. Maybe they have been tested, but they haven't had an older man bestow that respect upon them to say, I understand what you've been through, son. It was hard, but you are on the other side now, right? That is some of the things I think young men and young boys are missing in terms of their development, for the challenge, the acknowledgement, the respect, and another man looking you eye to eye saying, I see you, and it is good enough. Ralph, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Man, I think you're right on, and it's a maturing process And it has to happen throughout life. I'm 54. I still have, I'm a double OG. I still have a triple OG talking into my life. You understand what I'm saying? I still got somebody 65, right? 68, who's been 54 before, who's been in the position I am. And so this development into manhood, it begins, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. I read a book years ago called Raising a Modern Day Knight. It was phenomenal. I read it when I was a young man. I had all three of my kids by the time I was 25. Me and my wife were high school sweethearts, got married early. But this mentoring, it's not just 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It goes on throughout a lifetime. And so I don't know if we will fully be finished, when we leave here and in my belief system until I see Jesus Christ face to face. But along the way, you always have someone ahead of you, out front of you, with the same values now, guys. I think we all know that. We're all moving in the right direction, same values that are maturing us along the way. And Antwaun, I don't really think we reach full maturation. I think we get into this manhood thing, right? We grow into it, but then there's still aspects of it. Because as manly as I want to seem, sometimes I still want to act out like a little roughneck sometime. And I got to have older OGs tell me, hey, man, no, okay, you can shout about it in the back room, but out front, this is how we're going to react to. I think, Ted, man, it's ongoing, this manhood thing and what a real man is. I think it's ongoing. I don't think it ever stops.
This is kind of crazy that this whole conversation is going, because as you mentioned, you started, Ted, and you passed on to Ralph. There's something that popped in I didn't share, and I think this really ties into this conversation. So I mentioned my father being a 30-year Marine, retired and enlisted in 1960, retired in 1990, passed away in 1996 from leukemia from Agent Orange exposure. But he was not my biological father. He adopted my older brother and I when I was about 3 years old. The reason I mention that, my biological father was a jerk, obviously, abusive to my mom, pretty much not around for my brother and I. And my first encounter with my biological father after my parents got together was at some event, and my biological father shows up and he calls me and my brother to him. I run behind my dad, grab his leg, look around like, who the hell is that?
Yeah.
I don't know you. So I mentioned that because had my father not come into my life, number one, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Number two, I would be dead or in jail. Right. So we talk about what a man can do for the next generation. You talk about the OG, that he's still my OG, even though he's gone. I still recall things from time to time. That's why I keep going back to those letters, because it reminds me of what he inspires. And also my nonprofit is named after him, because I'm reminded of I'm the man I am today because of my father. So I just wanted to kind of share. I think that really does tie into where we talk about passing that torch, but it's not always traditionally, because, that's the other thing we talk about. Some men don't want to be fathers to somebody else's kids. Yeah. Well, it might be something you get to later, Michael, but I don't want to jump the gun.
Fatherhood is one of those things where it's an option, because the man cannot be in the picture and he just has to pay child support. Typically, the mom's going to be in the picture. If she doesn't want to, she's going to give the kid to an orphanage, something along those lines, or maybe a grandparent. The court system is going to favor women before they favor a man. And so what happens is these men who maybe want to be fathers, they're taking their ability to be fathers away. So they might just have picked the wrong woman. And it's very important that we pick the right woman. And we have to look at our relationships, because if we look at our fathers and the relationship with our mother, like how you saw your biological father, Antwaun, was toxic to your mother. And even for me growing up, my father was in and out of the picture. I'm not saying he was a bad father. He was a great father, but he was in and out of the picture. He was in his bad boy phase. He was going in and out of jail, drinking, doing all these different things. And I had a choice to make. I had a choice to either follow him and say that's what a man is, or I have to drink a 6-pack. I have to ride motorcycles. I have to get in bar fights, or I can use perception and say, this is not what I want for my life. I want to be better. And so as he was going on that road of just, alcohol, finally, he gets to that point, even though we're telling him, you need to stop drinking, you need to get back in shape, and you need to start paying attention. He has a stroke. And this happened, I believe, 2019. 2019, he had a stroke. So he had to go through that whole therapy process for over a year. And he was luckily able to walk, but he's not the same, right? So the man that I looked up to when I was growing up, he was strong. He was in construction. Like, he had biceps the size of boulders. You would just look at him and be like, this is a man, right? He always showed up. I will say that he showed up when it counted. But then there was just sometimes when he just flaunted that responsibility of being a man or being a father because he wanted to be a bad boy. He wanted to go drink. He wanted to go do what he wanted to do. And it wasn't until he had that, I guess, life lesson, that trauma of that stroke, where he finally realized, like, I need to start paying attention to my health. I need to start paying attention to my family. My mom, completely traditional Puerto Rican, so she stayed with him through all the hell, all the troubles. I'm grateful for that too, because it showed me that you can find a woman who's going to stay with you even in your weakest moments. Even in my marriage, I mean, I'm still early on in my marriage, only 3 years in, where it's sometimes I question myself, like, can I make it? Can I make it all the way to, until the end of life, in the 50s and 60s, and still be married to the same woman? And even though she gave me the most amazing gift of all, of my son, it's still something that I have to combat, because I can go down that road of saying, well, she's not the same anymore because she packed on a few pounds after the baby. Or I might just see that, or we're not vibing anymore, right? So it's a whole bunch, but I'm fortunate enough that I had 3 generations of parents and grandparents who stayed married and had that traditional value. And today we have that modern type of mindset where if it's broke, don't bother fixing it. So many people don't even bother fixing it. So they just kind of push on to the next. So, okay, well, I have 3 baby mamas. Well, why don't you focus on 1 baby mama? Or why do you even get to that point where you have 3 baby mamas, right? It's something that we have to talk about, because many people are so quick to toss away something that's broken and they're not willing to fix it anymore. And that's something that we really have to focus on. I want to kind of get your take on this, Ralph, because I know you do a lot of pastoring and you probably do a lot of marriage counseling with people, especially if they're having some difficulties, helping people understand that marriage is not something that's just a moment.
No, man, marriage is not. Let me answer the question first. And I was going to, you said you ask yourself, can I make it? And I think the brothers here that are married will tell you, yes, you can. You can make it. You better make it, because ain't nothing in the streets. I'm just telling you that right now. I'm going to be honest with you about that. You ain't nothing out there, brother. You better make it. But marriage is work. Marriage is work. And take it. I've been married 35 years now. I hope my wife doesn't see this. About 35 years. And high school sweetheart. And it's work. And it's 100%. And it's communicating. It's reaching out. It's not about being right. It's about doing what's right. It's not about, my dad used to say, man, stop trying to be right and be relational. It's really putting in the work with, this is the person that God gave you to make it work with. It's not going to get any better. So it's for you to make it beautiful and make it better. And you're right, Ted, I want you to comment on it, man. This generation, I'm not a generation hater. I never want to be that guy. I think this generation has a lot to give. But they've been taught that, like you just said, if it's broke, I just throw it away and get something new. But we don't do that. A man doesn't do that in marriages and in relationships. He tries his darndest, his best, until nothing else can be done anymore. And Ted, what do you think about that, man?
Man, Rob, I love that it's coming this way, because you guys have just been putting out so many good things that I'd love to comment on, because when it comes to modern man, you're right in terms of the development of man, but it's an oxymoronic title, because manhood in itself is foundational. Yeah. And just like you, Ralph, I got very traditional core values. Grew up in a household, lucky and blessed enough to have both my parents in the household. Watched the camaraderie between my mom and my dad, how my dad would leave early in the morning, coming back late. My mom would handle things in the house. When my mom had to work late, my dad would handle it. The thought process is, being the person, I've only been married a year and a half, but the mentorship I've received from my parents, the mentorship I received from my pastor, the mentorship I received from the men I look up to, is the weight of commitment. Yeah. The weight of commitment and what it really means. When we talk about being men and you make the commitment, I had a guest on my podcast, actually just came out this week. She broke it down. She studied men for 30 years. And she said, she asked me when I got engaged to my wife. And I said, 2019. We got married in 2021. She goes, I'm willing to bet your commitment was, you got married in 2019. She got married in 2021. You got married in 2019. And she was right, because of how my values were. When I decided this was going to be my woman, when I committed to the woman, is when I proposed, right? I made that commitment then. And obviously, before God, before witnesses, I made that promise. So that is my commitment. Even more so, the most important decision you make, as you mentioned before, Michael, is the woman you pick to be the mother of your children. I think maybe the most important commitment we make outside of marriage is also going to be becoming a father, because that's a commitment also. Michael, you referenced before, he showed up. Like that's what is crazy when I talk to a lot of guys, and I'm still young and I'm still learning. I have a lot to learn, but some guys are like, man, I don't know if I'm good enough. They're going to be better off than me. Just show up, because part of being a man is being dependable. Are you there through the hard times? Are you there when they need you? Are you foundational? The commitment is really what this all comes down to. The commitment in marriage, the commitment in fatherhood. I'm going to be there to dust you off. I'm going to be there when you fall down. I'm going to be there to celebrate. Like, not to spoil it, but Ralph, you just say you got someone that's going to look up in the crowd and you want them to see you later. You know, that's about being dependable. And I'd love to hear more on what you think about this, Antwaun, in terms of that commitment, who we choose to be the mother of our children, and when we make that decision to actually be a father.
Yeah, so I'm going to be the one guy in this group. My wife and I weren't fortunate enough to have kids of our own. We went through like 3 miscarriages, and I look at that as a blessing, though, because now I have the ability and the willingness and dedication to impact more lives. We talk about the sanctity of marriage. I didn't get married till I was 39. My wife and I we've been together for 21 years, been married for 18 years. I truly have my best friend as my partner. To even bring that home even more, my nephew is 29 years old. And about a year and a half ago, my brother told me, he goes, man, I want to have a marriage like Uncle Twan does. Because whenever he comes to visit, he goes, you guys act like you just met. I mean, you guys were in love with each other all the time. Even if you don't always show it, you can tell the way you interact with each other. So, finding that person, that makes a big difference. And I think the one thing, too, that may be a little different is knowing that I don't have kids. I'm able to put more into my relationship because I don't have to divide my responsibilities between my partner and kids. But we do have 2 dogs, but they're like kids. Trust me, man. Them vet bills, man, they mount up. I'm telling you. But no, you're absolutely right. I think it is inherently important, too, to understand that even though some people, like you made a great point, Ted, when you said that you got married in 2019, but your wife got married in 2021, right? Mm-hmm. Based on what this therapist said, it's this exact same thing with me. We got married in 2004. So that meant 2001, probably 2002, I knew. And it's just one of those things where you got to convince her that you're committed to that. So that's what those next 2 years were. That was just about her going, hey, he is the one. And the communication, lines of communication, the most important thing for us is communication. There's not a time, we've only gone to bed one time in 18 years of marriage. We've gone to bed mad, and it was my fault. And I admit that it was my fault. So, Ralph, you're going to chime in on that.
Well, I want to say this. I don't want you guys to think that my stuff was neatly packaged. Understand this. I was a father before I was a man, and I was a father before I was a husband. My wife and I, our first child, we weren't married. She was a teen mother. All right. I was 20. She was 18. So I don't want you to think that, he was married, then he had these kids. No. Yeah, I come from great stock. She comes from great stock. But I was far from being a man when I had my first child. I was far from being a man, when we got married. I got married, I think I was 22, about to turn 23, because our oldest, she was about to be 3 years old. I was still a boy. I wanted to do man things. Yes, I chose her. We're going to make this thing work. Very wise mother. My mom said the greatest thing you could do for your child is to love their mother. Right? That came from my mom. The greatest thing you do for your child is to love their mom. And so it wasn't, you had 2 kids getting married. So it was ups and downs and trials and tribulations. And I become a police officer at a very young age, 21. I shouldn't have been a police officer at that age. So this journey into manhood, I was a lot of things before I was a man. And I want to say that to somebody listening and somebody watching this and whatever you're doing. I was a lot of things before I was a man. I was a male, but before this maturation into manhood, I was a lot of things before that. And it came with time. It came with development. It came with dedication. It came with doing the work and putting in the work. And, I'm listening to these young brothers married a year and a half, and I smile. Oh, man, that's great. And I thought, Antwaun, they don't know. they don't even know each other yet until about year 10. You don't even know her yet. You don't know her. You don't know
That's
her
true.
until about year
That's
10. But and so I just want to make that known that for someone listening, if when you're listening to me, you're not listening to a guy who had it together straight out of high school, college football, military. No, we did a lot of things the hard way, and this maturation into manhood, it comes with work and dedication, and it comes with having the proper people in your life. So, that's what I wanted to say.
And not to make light of what you said, Antwaun, I know you didn't have any children, but you have all these players that you have coached over the years. Yeah. And I'm sure many of those young boys that you were coaching look up to you as a father figure. So they're looking up to you and like, all right, this is what Coach T is doing. And I'm going to emulate that. When I go to the gym, typically the older gentlemen in the gym, they're in their 50s or 60s at this point. I call them pops.
Hey,
and
wait a minute.
I call them pops.
Wait a minute. You can't call him Unc. You can't call me Unc. Well, I gotta be pops. You know what I mean?
Well, the reason I call them pops is because I'm going to learn something from them. Yeah. Because I see the dedication, right? The commitment to being in the gym at that age. And they're continually upkeeping themselves when most people, they get married, they start, packing on a few pounds, and then they fall off. And that's just because of circumstance or that's what they think, or they don't have time. We all have time, right? But we don't use that time effectively. So when I look up to these men in the gym, is someone I want to follow. So the way I look at a leader or a man that I want to follow is I look at them for where they are today, right? So if they're in their 60s, I can see how they're looking right now. And I say, well, they're really good. And it's not just physical, it's mentality too, because it takes some type of mentality to stay committed to go to the gym and to keep on going, because it's easy to start a New Year's resolution. Oh, I'm going to start going to the gym, and you start going to the gym 3 months and you stop, right? That type of commitment. And that commitment stems from everywhere else, right? Relationships, businesses, physical fitness, right? Yeah. That commitment is so important. So I learned from that. Because again, just talking about what we were talking about before, it's easy to stop. It's easy to give up, but it's more difficult to keep on pushing, especially if things are uncertain.
Yeah, I just want to chime in here. Just want to let Michael know that Ralph and I are unks right now. We're not pops yet. I'm just speaking for us. I'm just speaking for us.
And let me let you know a secret why Unc shows up at the gym so early. Antwaun, I'm going to tell him. The reason why we go early is because we go to bed 8:30 at night, bro. That's why we can sleep at 8:30, 8:45. That's why we go early. I don't want you to put too much stock in it. But that's why
right. You got that. Hey, look, listen. So I just shared this with somebody yesterday. You guys appreciate this. So I have an open gym, invitational open gym, 7th through 12th grade boys and girls. And on some weeks we have odd numbers of kids in the gym. And they'll say, "Hey, Coach T, you going to play?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll play." And before I can play, they got to check me out. They say, "You got your knee sleeves on?" I'm like, "Yeah." You got your back brace on? I'm like, "Yeah." All right, you can play. If I don't have those on, they will not let me play. So that's them looking out for me, which I appreciate it. Plus, they're also looking out for me because I told them if I ever play and my wife finds out, I better not be sore. Because she'll know, because she can tell by the way I move. So going back to Ralph, after 10 years, 18 years, she knows the way you move. It's 2 steps, man. If it's off, she knows. She goes, "You played today, didn't you?" I'm like, yeah, I played.
I just want to encourage you guys to learn your wives. This is what a man does. Learn your lady. Learn your lady. Because like Antwaun said, she is learning you. Learn your lady. And this is how you develop long-lasting love. Yeah. That's what a man does. That's what a man does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Amen. And I'm writing that down and taking notes, because what I was just going to allude to in terms of Antwaun and Ralph, or the unks right now on the panel, is something you mentioned, Michael, was the mentorship, right? And that's something I talk a lot about with Modern Man. Like you alluded to it, Ralph, and I really appreciate the vulnerability there and the transparency and the fact that no man is a perfect man. No. Right? I've made many mistakes, and I have many more mistakes ahead of me, right? And I'm sitting here from a young man who's made those mistakes from not listening to anybody, to finally look around and realize, my dad tried to have me avoid this. I've always been the youngest of my group of friends, and they've tried to have me avoid this. And I've realized, I sat down, like, if I start listening to these men that are older than me who are trying to pour in some knowledge into me, this is going to save me money and jail time. Yeah. And I should probably start paying attention. And that is when my life started to take a turn. And what was important about that was I didn't just go to one person for all the information I needed. I took the notes down, learn your lady, because Antwaun and Ralph, you were both two gentlemen who, from what I can gather, have very prosperous relationships. I'm trying to emulate that. I'm going to take a note on that. Right. But if you guys say, hey, I got a business idea, no disrespect, I don't know what your businesses look like. Right. So I encourage a lot of guys to take heed of where you're getting your advice from. Where are you getting that advice from? Because your buddy I can call my buddy when me and my wife get into an argument. She's, oh man, she's just tripping. Don't worry about that. But instead, I called a friend of mine who's got a 20+ year relationship, and he says, Ted, she's looking for codependency there. She's looking for connection there. She don't care if you saw the movie already. She's trying to watch it with you. And I'm like, thank you to these men that I've literally have been able to put my ego aside and just listen. I can learn and maybe avoid some mistakes. I feel that's resonating with you, Ralph. I'd love for you to kind of piggyback off that.
Yeah, I had to sit through The Notebook, I had to sit through it, the movie The Notebook, But no, it's it's true, man. And we have to keep in every area of our lives, whether it's marriages, whether it's finances, whether it's raising the children, you have to keep your tribe and men around you who've gone a little further. And you can have peers too, but primarily, your peers, you just might be bouncing ideas off one another. But to really move forward, you can have some guys that have been out there before that you're moving in the same direction in every area of your life, guys that are successful, guys that have your best interest in mind. And this is what we're going to keep going back to this. What is a man thing? And sometimes it's laying down that ego. You have to allow somebody in your life, Michael, that will call you on your stuff, that you may not agree with it, but will call you on it, and you be cool with it. Quick story, and I want to hear how you feel about that, Mike, is I have a cousin a few years older than me, probably around Antwaun's age, and we're really tight. And I called him one time. He's been married a long time as well. Matter of fact, I thank God that he's in my life because he's been married over close to 40 years. And I called him up, and I was whining about something, and he kept hanging up. And I called him back, and he kept hanging up. I said, yo, man, we must get disconnected. He said, no, I don't talk to crying women. and because I can receive that. And I just started laughing. You see that flag behind you, right? So, I just started laughing. I said, you know what? I was whining, wasn't I? He said, yeah, now we can talk. So you have to have someone that can speak into your life in a frequency that you can receive that'll move you in the right direction. A man can give that, and a man must be able to receive that. So, Michael, how you feel about that, man? About having somebody in your life that can call you out.
I mean, the more the merrier to me. I always appreciate someone who calls me out when I'm not showing up because I might not see it. What I do, in my career as a mindset coach is I help people see their blind spots. And oh man, I got plenty of them. So when I have a man telling me, or just a coach in general telling me, like, this is where you're failing, or this is where you're not showing up, I pay attention, because if someone can see that, I need to learn how to see that myself too. It's easy for the ego to get hurt or bruised. Someone says that, you're failing in this area, or you could be better in this area. I think some people, they see it as an attack on their character and themselves. But for me, fortunately, like through the whole teaching process and going to school to be a teacher, you have to have mentors and cooperating teachers. So every single day, the teacher would give me, at the end of the day, things I needed to work on. And I remember one day, it was after one of my evaluations, and it was not good. It was a bad evaluation. So like the professor was like, if you don't fix it, you're not going to pass, right? It was that. So the cooperating teacher I was working with, he brought me into the room. He says, you have to fix this. And it was like that whole night, I was just like miserable. I was just like down in the dumps, depressed, basically. And I was like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Right. And then I was like, I just have to dig deeper. He was there to support me, but he was able to call me out and say, this is what you need help on, and this is where you need to work. From there, I was able to do exactly what he said. He was able to see my blind spots and to see where I needed improvements. And by the time that professor came back for my next evaluation, she didn't even recognize who I was. She says, he's totally different. It was because I followed the mentorship of another man who saw where I can make improvements. I think sometimes people they see those improvements as, okay, you are not perfect, right? So I'm trying to make you perfect. But when in reality, they're just trying to help you. They're trying to make sure that you're in a better place. And I think, especially for my father, one of his greatest goals in life wasn't to be rich or famous or anything. He wanted to give his kids a better life than he had, passing the baton. I know that cooperating teacher that I was working with, his goal was passing the baton to make me better. And I think sometimes we get that misconstrued with, oh, he's picking on me or she's picking on me, right? It's not an attack on your character. It's almost like an uplifting to try to make you a better person. That is where you have to find mentors. You have to find people. And when I moved from Connecticut to Texas, I also found mentors that talked to me, that helped me see my blind spots. And one of the greatest questions I was asked down here was 2017, I believe, when he asked me this question. It was another successful man. This is a big head honcho guy. He was a GM for General Motors. So he was like doing all the ins and outs, making millions of dollars a year. And he said, what is your value? And I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, okay, well, how much am I worth? Well, I have student loans. I'm like, so that's, that's a minus. I had like a 2006 Honda Accord. So maybe that's worth something. And I was looking at the financial number, but then I started to think, well, what is my value as a person? Then I gave him the answer. I was priceless, but he was looking for something different. And I asked the ladies the same question in our group 1 episode. What is your value? And it was something I had to work on with a coach. But I want to touch base on what is your value in the sense of who you are as a man, or it could be financial if you want to go down that road. But typically, I think that question is more of what do you see value in yourself as? And we're going to start with Ted. I know it's going to be one of those questions because we're going to start from the young men to the, to the unks and the, to the unks in the group. So
you notice how he hesitated when he said,
I was going to say,
I was thinking I was going to say, old man. I was going to
say, old man. He was about to say, old man.
I was like, unks in the group. So we're going to start with Ted, and we're going to start to break down, well, what is your value as a man, or what do you see as valuable in your life?
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Michael. And I appreciate going first. That way I'm going to have all my thoughts out and cleared up so I can take notes when the unks take over, because I'm learning a lot right now in this discussion. So fellas, I really do appreciate it. For me personally, as a man, my values lean on integrity, lean on character, lean on dependability, providing emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially. It's not just financial. Those are the values, that I have personally. But as a family, my wife and I did this practice. She wrote her values down. I wrote mine. We decided the values that we would build in our family. Actually, for Christmas, I just had it printed out on canvas for us to hang up in the apartment. I gave it to her, and we're looking to put it up. But our values as a family would be faith, family, trust, contribution, integrity. These are the things that I feel are going to be good foundations, and I want them on public display because I've been told by my old heads in my life, I call them old heads, I've been told that our kids are going to call us out on our BS. Yeah. And I want those values displayed so our kids, God willing, in the future, will call us out when we're not living up to those values. Our friends and, those people around us can call us out when we're not living to the values that are posted on that wall. So those are some of the values that I lean into, that I really hold near and dear to my heart. And I think I say contribution is one of them. I'd love to learn more on some of the values that I might have missed out on, Antwaun.
You hit a couple key ones there, Ted. For me, the integrity and character are major, because that's what I do every day. So that's what's important to me. And I think before I think about talking about what they are, I think it's important to understand how you come to those values, like connecting the dots over your life and all the experiences, kind of like what we've been talking about, connecting the dots to make you come to what are the values that are important to you. Like for Ralph and I talking about the military background, we already know that discipline and responsibility comes with that without question. The other ones are your life experiences. And for me, vulnerability is really important because when we talk to kids, like you said, they'll call you out on their BS, Ted. That's great. You're absolutely 100% right. In order for them not to call you out on your BS, they got to know that you're authentic and genuine with them. So those are two values that are top of my list, and not being non-judgmental. And because I think, Michael, you were making reference talking about mentorships and people that will call you out. That's part of the job I have with the young people. But at the same time, they know they have the green light to call me out on my BS. And because it's a learning process for all of us, because I want to help them get better, but they're helping me be a better coach every interaction I have with them. So I would just add honesty, authenticity, and genuality to that. and then Ralph, Unc. Oh, I'm going to call you bruh. Because
Hey,
you
bro.
and I are brothers, man. I'm going to call you bro.
You call me little bro. Little bro.
Little bro. Hey, I got this. Hey, I'm Big Tasty, you little yum yum.
No, we won't do that. We won't do that. Oh man, this is great stuff, and thank you for passing that to me. You asked the question, what is my value or what are my values? And so I think I'm going to answer it from the perspective, because I share the same values as most of them on this panel, give or take a few others. But my value, I think my value to my family, you mentioned prices. I think my value, patriarchal, leaving something behind, more than money. Of course, money. My funeral will not be a product of a GoFundMe page. That we ain't doing that. But leaving something of value with them. One of the things that I talk about it in my book and talk about it with my family constantly. You cannot control what happens all the time, but you can control how you respond to it every time. And this manhood journey, you're going to have to be resilient. You're going to have to control your emotions, control how you respond to things. And so I think my value is really pouring into that next generation. My value, I'm a man of prayer. That's definitely one of my values. I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't come from that type family. Longevity because of that. I know I'm here not because of only my parents' prayers, but their parents' prayers and so on, and leaving a legacy like that. So although I share a lot of the same values you guys do, probably we share them all the same. And I do also want to say this. Yes, all of the kids, and Coach, all the kids will call us out. Here's the thing. Everything's being recorded now. We can't hide what we did. We can't hide what we said. I think one of the saddest things that occur, and I'm a PK, I'm a pastor's kid, a preacher's kid. And one of the saddest things that can occur, and I say it to my kids all the time, all three of I call them kids, they're adults. They're adults. All of them are adults, 30 plus, are involved in ministry. And I said, it's a sad thing especially as a believer, when your kids don't even see it real enough in your life that they won't participate in what you're doing. My kids are here not because I'm their dad, but because they see how authentic my walk is, or how authentic my walk is in every area of my life. And a man will make sure he's doing that. You will lose influence over your children faster than you can blink an eye, or you lose influence over these kids we coach, over the men we mentor, by not being authentic and not living it out in front of them. So, that's my value, to say that, I can not only preach about it, teach about it, talk about it, it can be lived out.
The idea of values is closely tied to responsibilities. And I know you have a responsibility right now to go see your grandson.
Yes.
So I don't want to keep you. But if you can, before you go, give us any last words and then tell the audience where they can find you.
Well, listen, first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. These brothers, listen, email me, connect with me. I'm serious. I want to call all of you tonight and just say, hey, thanks. And I don't want this to be the last time we get together on this platform or any other platform. I'm in Jersey. I'm not far from any of you guys either. And so I thank you for being honest. And one of the last words, I guess, I used to ask people on my podcast that you can find on Spotify, Unstoppable with Ralph Graves Jr. If you could have a billboard anywhere in the world, where would it be and what would it say? And I think my billboard would definitely tell everybody, don't give up. Just keep showing up and showing out. And no matter what may come your way, be resilient. Don't give up. But guys, my book, I have a book out, Unstoppable, 7 Universal Laws that will transform how you pursue and achieve success. The next one will be out this fall. You can find that on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. To check me out, I'm everywhere. LinkedIn, Facebook, not Instagram. I took off Instagram. I got rid of it. Became toxic. See, that's another thing I can admit. It was toxic. Got out of there. But I'm on Twitter, Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. You can check me out through my church's website, cornerstonec3e.net. cornerstonec3e.net. And you'll see my profile page. I'm available for speaking engagements, whether it's to your company, whether it's whatever. It's not just, I just don't get up and preach, but I speak throughout the country. And email me, ralph@ralphgravesjr.com. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch, man. We're definitely going to connect.
Yeah, brothers.
Thank you, Ralph.
Good luck to you.
God bless you guys. All right.
It's an honor.
All right, take
Good
care.
luck to your grandson.
Bye-bye.
See you.
All right. So we lost one of our valuable team members today, but I know Antwaun has enough wisdom for both Ted and myself. So he's going to be carrying us along this way to the end. I took the hosting spot for the beginning of the podcast, but now I want to give it to these other gentlemen. They are hosts of podcasts, wonderful podcasts. So I encourage you to check them out. Also, their podcast links will be in the description box below. So make sure you subscribe, follow, and listen in. Let's start with Antwaun so he can give us a few lessons on the concept of hosting and asking valuable questions.
Going back to what we were talking about previously, we were talking about mentors and going to be able to go to people to call you out. I think there's another concept and aspect of it that's really important too, is how you deal with those that recognize that you're making moves in the right direction and they try to sabotage or circumvent what you're trying to do. And that's a big part of being a man too, and recognizing when people are trying to tear you down. And I like to add that there's a quote that I absolutely love, and I recite it every day to remind me. It's very dangerous to surround yourself with people that envy you because you treat them like family, but they treat you like competition. So that's one of the things I think is really important as men to understand, that every time you're trying to achieve something, you feel good about it, your circle feels good about it. But you got to remember, there's always people that don't. And if you're not strong enough to deal with it, that will make you take steps backwards. So I think it's really important. And Ted, I don't know, as a younger gentleman, this is something that would be great advice for those that you work with as well, and for me to share with you.
No, yeah, absolutely. Antwaun, that's a phenomenal question. And it makes me think of a book that I read that I would love to recommend to folks called The Power of the Other. I believe it's by Dr. Henry Cloud. And what was important about it was it taught me how to audit my relationships. And that's kind of what you're talking about really quick is, okay, who's really happy for you when you win and who's not congratulating you in those moments. The book dives into 4 different types of relationships, corner 1, 2, 3, and 4. Corner 1 being a relationship where it's always negative, right? How many people, like, if they call you, once you see the name on the caller ID, you roll your eyes, oh, snap. Like, you're already in an energy before you even talk to them, right? So that's like a corner 1. But then you have that corner 2 relationship, which you need to be careful of, is how many people do you have in your life that act like your roses don't stink? Like, everything you do is a gift to this world, right? It's that false praise. They put you on a pedestal and they can give you a false sense of confidence, and you need to watch out for that, right? And then there's the corner 3, which is just the loner. You don't have any of these relationships. But what you want to find and what you want to cultivate are the corner 4 relationships. And this is what I actually had to reprogram and unlearn things in my life when I asked myself the certain questions in terms of, where did I learn this from? Who taught it to me? What intentions did they have for my lives, and what intentions did they maybe have for themselves? And then I realized some of the information I got at a young age might have been from somebody who wanted to use my athletic ability for their gain or something like that. Because the corner 4 relationship is a relationship where there's appropriate praise, but there's also loving critique. Loving critique, right? That's what we're talking about, checking each other. How many people do you have, like brothers, who can talk to you a certain way, but you receive it because you know it's coming from a good place? A relationship has been established. You've gained rapport with this person. They've shown a lack of judgment in your down times, but they've also been able to lovingly critique you and adjust you. Those are the relationships that I think as men we should all focus on and cultivate, which is why the mission with Modern Man is connecting men and pursue their potential, right? You want to have those similar values. You want to know that this person has my best interest at heart. So I can learn things from them. I can maybe listen to more of those critiques. And then those other relationships that might have some falsehoods about it, time also will tell, but also kind of keeping certain things close to the chest. Not everybody needs to know everything. Vulnerability is very important, but I have a very small group of people that I call when I need help. And that's been very helpful because those are my corner for relationships that I keep really close to the chest. And Michael, I'd love to hear more of some of those relationships you've been able to cultivate in your life.
Before I do that, I want to touch base on the idea of competition, what Antwaun was talking about. I think we have a misconception of what good competition is, because we think competition is keeping up with the Joneses. So, my neighbor has this, or my friends has this, right? So we got to have the latest phones. We have to have the latest rides, latest threads, right? Shoes, kicks, whatever. We give ourselves a competition that is the superficial things. So we look at people who have something different or might be different. So then we create a void. Why do you think there's so much gang violence? It's because they're in competition with each other, when in reality, those are just brothers killing brothers. When they can come together and they can figure out, well, what can we do to work together? We're not in competition. It's just that they have different values or a different belief. So they automatically hate people because they're a Crip or they're a Blood or they're on the east side and I'm on the north side. So we can't be cool because we're in different regions. Like the people who are in different parts of the world or just maybe different values, different ethics, cultures, you can find some commonality between them. When you open up to different cultures, different mentalities, you get to learn not only about them, you get to learn about yourself. Because I find that when I open up to other cultures and to new ideas, I broaden my view because we are so, singular in how we view things. So this is how I do things. It's always been done this way. That's one of the most dangerous phrases a person can think about. It's always been done this way. I've always been doing it this way. That's how my dad did it. That's how his granddad did it. That is how we're going to keep on doing it. We have to look at the broader spectrum. And I think the more people you allow into your life, and not just allowing anyone in your life, because there's going to be people who are going to be toxic. There's going to be people who are going to weigh you down. There are going to be people who are stopping you from achieving your goals, your success, and your maximum capabilities. You have to be very cautious in who you allow to have control of the way you think. And if you find yourself empty after you're talking to someone or just dealing with someone, it's probably a sign saying maybe you should separate a little bit. And not that it has to be a long-term thing, just until that person realizes maybe I should make some changes. So for me, when I'm dealing with people in my life, I make sure that it's a mutual type of growth process. So like, just hanging out with you fellas today, I'm getting something out of this. And I hope that is the same for you too. I hope you're getting something out of this where you're going to leave this and you're going to say that was good versus, I hope I don't have to do that again, right? I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen in any episode of the podcast because I want to bring people who have something to say, something who have to offer to the world. And then we compound that and we continue to make growth. We continue to make progress and we continue to change people's mindsets to something more positive.
Well, I like that breakdown, Michael, because you were talking about the different individuals that come in, some and making a mutual relationship. That for me, that's huge because I never really think about them that much. I just grade them based on how my interaction is, as opposed to maybe building a mutual. I mean, that's the other thing. Instead of quickly going, hey, you know what? I don't think that's going to happen. There may be some way of mutually building a relationship and fostering that relationship. But I'll go back to what I was saying before. And I love that, Ted. I'm going to remind me, share that book. I definitely want to read that. I think that's awesome. That's 4 points.
Absolutely.
Lately, I've been evaluating every relationship because my circle is getting smaller. And the reason my circle is getting smaller is because my commitment is getting stronger and my direction is getting clearer. So I need to eliminate the ones that are on the fence because when I'm debating whether I want to stay building that relationship, it's taking time away from my progress. And so, again, I think to your point, I got to maybe look into that relationship and go, hey, okay, what are we going to do with this thing? Is it going to be beneficial for me or not? And not necessarily to cut it off to your point, but it's just, hey, that's one that I'll just come back to every now and again. Hey, how are you? Whatever. But I'm also finding out that more people are not as intentional with building. And I think when we talk about relationships, people aren't intentional about how they reach out. They're just trying to chase dollars. And I tell people, I'm not trying to make money. I'm trying to change lives, So that's what's important. When people engage with me, I let them know right up front what I'm about. If that's a mutual relationship, maybe not now, but maybe down the road, cool. But if not, hey, let's kind of go our way because I don't want to be distracted or knocked off my path. Because for me, I feel as though I have a lot of momentum going right now. And I don't want to be rude to people, but at the same time, I want to make sure that I stay true to who I am and what I'm trying to achieve. And I don't know if you agree with that, Ted. Or
Absolutely. I think kind of what you mentioned in terms of that clarity of direction. I love that you mentioned your circle's getting smaller because your commitments are getting stronger. I had to write that down because when we fully understand the weight of the commitments we make less of them. And some of what I alluded to before or what you mentioned before a while back earlier, Antwaun, which shout out to anybody who's been listening to this whole thing up till now, because I've been getting so much value from this. But you mentioned about some of the hesitancy for some fathers to raise someone else's kid, right? And that's a commitment. I actually come from a household. My father, my biological father, raised my older sister, which is my half sister. She was 3 years old when my mother and my father met. This man who I look up to came in the house, treated her like she was his daughter. I didn't know any different until I was 18 years old and they told me. I spent 18 years of my life thinking she was my full biological sister. He walked her down on her wedding day, danced with her on her wedding night because that was his daughter. He understood the gravity and the weight of the commitment that he made. And so I love when you're talking about your direction and where you're going, because I think intentionality is so important for us as men. Clarity is so important for us as men in terms of, okay, where are we going? What are we doing? What's necessary? What's extra? What's heavy? What's, unfortunately, what is dead weight? And sometimes there has to be some blunt and honest truth in when we analyze what's going on in our lives. Because when I got to a point in my life where I was so frustrated with my current situation, I had to cut the fat. And when I say cut the fat, it wasn't necessarily just people. Some of it were habits. Some of it were things I was doing and things that I enjoyed doing. I didn't want it to go, but it had to go. If I wanted to improve my life, it had to go. So I think what you're talking about, Antwaun, is really kind of understanding. And I love you. I respect you. You're just not going where I'm going. And I wish you the best in all your endeavors. But I'm going to be heading in this direction. And when I find those who are going to come with me, sure, if I want to go fast, I can go alone. If I want to go far, I can go with others. But I'm going to be intentional in who those people are that I pick. And that kind of alludes to a little bit about the positive competition, because you guys could be running in the same direction. But when you have the good wind in your sails, as I mentioned, those good people behind you, that could not only help you go towards your direction, that could increase the pace in that direction. And I'd love to hear some of your experiences with that as well, Michael.
I love when you see like a UFC fight, these are men going at it, right? They're about to knock each other's heads off. But then after the fight, they come together and they give hugs and love and handshakes and say, you did a great job. It's a great fight, right? I appreciate that, because even though they have that moment of you're my enemy, it doesn't mean you're my foe. So it's important to understand the difference, because I think sometimes we just look at someone as, oh, they're not good for me, or this person's an obstacle in my life. But we just have to know our true values. And for me, I definitely want both of your takes on this, because how I view it is Carol Dweck, she did the growth mindset, fixed mindset type of mentality, where you can have people who are growth minded and they can be with you. And you can have people who are fixed mindset and they can be with you. But then at the same time, you understand that they're that fixed type of mindset. So you're going to not ask them for certain things, and you're going to ask your growth minded individual people for certain things, because they're going to have a more optimistic and open idea for what you're going for. A fixed mindset person is going to say, well, it can't be done, right? That, there's a lot of limits there. And so what I do typically is I just make sure that when I'm pushing in whatever, my business, relationship, that I have someone who is going to be a growth mindset type of mentality with me at all times. So whether it's my wife, or if my wife wanted to be fixed mindset that day or that month or whatever it be, that's cool. I have to find someone else to take that role, because if I just allow her to weigh me down, it makes me more negative on the inside, I guess you can say. I just need that growth type of mentality in my life. I need someone that's going to push me, who's going to challenge me. And it's not saying that, oh, you're not enough, right? It's not that. You are enough. It's just that you have so much more potential. You have so much more to give, versus, okay, you did well. And I remember one time, it was early on in my marriage, I would say year one, my wife told me, you're doing too much. And I just looked at her and I said, don't ever tell me that again. I said, you're the last person I want to hear that from. I am not doing enough, because I'm always telling myself there's more that I can do. And if I have the person I trust the most telling me that I'm doing enough, it wasn't beneficial. So she learned from that interaction. It wasn't an argument. It was just me saying, I need you to support me as much as you can. From there, she never said I was doing too much. I needed to take a break. She was always there saying, you can do it. You can push more. And I think having someone who can see your value is so important.
No, that last part, that is so, my wife, in a way, not dissimilar, but she's there for any and everything that I need. It's always, I say I'm going to do, it's always her next thing is, what do you need? She manages both my websites. I mean, she's my IT person, if you will. She does design for merchandise and all this crazy stuff like that. But I think you're absolutely right. It's important to have that person that supports what you do. But I wanted to go back, because I want to give you guys two examples of kind of what I was referencing earlier about the competition. We're talking about the competition and understanding relationships and where you are. I literally have two situations on either end of the spectrum. I mentioned earlier that I was started my second podcast yesterday. Well, that second podcast came because of another gentleman that does exactly what I do. But we knew that we could do more together than we could separately. So we got together. We're in two networking groups. So we kind of got to know each other. He reached out. He goes, hey, do you have an idea? I know you have a podcast. Would you be interested? I'm like, dude, that's right down both of our alleys. Why would we not do that? So we go and do that. So the flip side, I'm in an environment where I have the ability to impact 200 plus kids. They all have access to everything I have. I'm not a pushy type person because I believe there's value in what I offer. And if you see value, you grab that value. Not one person. And I'm going to tell you what I take from that is what I'm doing is 100% what they need, but it's not their idea. So they don't want to partake of it. At first, I took it personally because I'm like, hey, I just want to help. But if you don't want my help, I'll just give it to somebody else that does. So now here I am partnering with a guy doing a podcast. We're going to reach thousands, hopefully millions of people. So I look at that 200 opportunity as the opportunity to learn and say, hey, okay, that's no problem. I'll just refocus my attention, going back to what I was saying earlier, Ted, about being committed to my mission and being more clear, getting more clarity of where I'm going. That's what that told me. So those experiences, that's where my envy versus competition comes from, because that's envy. And I understand that because of experiences. And I just want to kind of calculate all that into one situation. But I always use that as my motivation, internal motivation, and my inspiration to do more. Because again, I'm not going to waste time. If you don't want it, I go where it's needed. And I think that's how we're going to progress and how I'm going to grow as a coach and how I'm going to reach more kids and along with this other gentleman.
If I may, the idea of like envy, people are always going to look at you, especially if you're doing something good in your life, if you're succeeding, if you're being ambitious, they're going to want to keep you down. They're going to want to say, you know what? We understand what you're doing, but we're not going to support it, because then at some level in their mind or how they think is that now you're superior to them. That's their mentality, right? He's progressing, he's advancing, and I'm staying stagnant. I'm staying exactly where I am. And I think for many people, it's a hard pill to swallow, because they're seeing themselves stay exactly where they were, exactly where they are, no changes. And they see you, going off, doing new ventures, doing new things, making an impact in the world. And they just look at their life and they see nothing. And for them, it's an eye-opening experience, but they want to keep their eyes closed because they don't want to pay attention to that.
Yeah. Oh, no. You're 100% right, Michael. That's, but like I said, it's humbling to a degree, but at the same time, it's hurtful. I would be lying to you if I wasn't being honest. When you know that, you see these kids on a daily basis and they look forward to seeing you, and you have an opportunity to see them more and contribute more to their lives to make them better. But the powers that be don't want you to do that for whatever reason. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that ethnicity had something to do with that to some degree.
Yeah. I think the mind is such an important place to focus on in terms of what we're talking about with competition, in terms of envy, and in terms of the collaboration. Like, I'm so excited for your podcast, Antwaun, because what you're doing is you're building from a place of abundance, right? There was a number of mindsets that we mentioned, the growth mindset with Carol Dweck versus the static mindset. And Antwaun, what you're also talking when it comes to envy and competition and now coming together is the scarcity mindset and the abundance mindset. And what's dangerous is when you have someone with a fixed mindset and a scarcity mindset. That's a dangerous one to have. And I've found a lot of people who have a growth mindset, but they still have that scarcity mindset, right? They think, okay, I can get better, but there's not enough out here for everybody. I'll tell you what, there is enough out here for everybody. I've met a lot of people with similar missions, and we're three brothers, and Ralph being another one, who are pouring into each other, pouring into others, pouring into mentorship. This is encouraging because the abundance is, we need more of this. So I think when it comes to understanding the importance of the mind and realizing that it does play tricks on us, it is going to whisper at us when you have 200 some odd kids available and they're not taking the low hanging fruit. So you're thinking, okay, is my fruit rotten? Is there something wrong with my fruit? You mentioned, race being a part of it. I remember when I first graduated school, it was 2010. I had a hard time getting a job in TV. And I remember at my lowest moment still being in that victim mentality, scarcity mindset, static mindset, thinking I was not getting a job because I was black. And I was just thinking that that was why. And this world was against me and there was nothing I can do. But when I took ownership of my life, right? Because if someone takes full ownership of their lives, there's no room for envy. There is no room for envy because everything is your responsibility, not your fault, your responsibility. I describe it like this because everyone's like, oh, well, it's not my fault that I'm here. Listen, if there was a knock on your door and there's a baby on the other side, it's not your fault that there's a baby on your doorstep. But you better believe that it's now your responsibility what happens next with that baby, whether you choose to take care of it, whether you choose to alert the authorities, but you have a responsibility now. There's no way to change that. So for anyone that might be stuck somewhere in life or they're in some place in life and they see the gifts within others, understand that extreme ownership, taking responsibility of your life and know that you are where you are because of the decisions that you made and they are where they are because of the decisions and the actions that they made. Now, acknowledging that, you put the ego aside. This is all mindset work, right? You put the ego aside and you say, hey, what did you do? Michael mentioned earlier being at the gym, calling the older guy Pops. That's great. That's exactly, I didn't call them Pops, but when I was at the gym and I see a guy squatting twice as much and he's an older guy, I had no shame. Excuse me, man. I'm in here squatting. I'm new to this. What did you do? And then he teaches me how to squat. And they have when the student becomes a teacher or grasshopper becomes a teacher. Now I learned how to squat. They're squatting. Oh man, you're lifting as much as me now. I said, you better watch out. I'm gonna catch you. That's where the positive competition comes into play. You better watch out. I'm gonna catch you. But it's coming from a good place. It's coming from a place of abundance. Where you mentioned, Michael, the fighters that are in that ring, they understand in those 3 rounds, those 5 rounds, those 12 rounds, however many they may be, they got better. You got me a few good times, and I got some good feedback when I messed up. Because when I didn't put my hand up, like my coach has been telling me, I got nicked in the face. Yeah. So part of what we're talking about is, releasing that ego through the envy when it comes to envy, and then having the growth mindset with the abundance mindset, but also the importance of the feedback, because some things are going to hurt in life, and that's okay because they're supposed to, because that's the only way we learn. Michael, I'd love to hear more on that. It's what you think, man. I
mean, you touched on so many great things. It's like, I'm going to give you my podcast. You take over. It's going to be a hit. Like all the things you said were just spot on. I would just listen to you. I was just like, he's so right. He's so right. And it wasn't anything where it was like I'm speechless at this point, because it's like you said everything that I was going to bring up. It's difficult sometimes, I think, for people to open up. I think it's difficult for people to make themselves vulnerable because we are taught to be independent, right? Be self-sufficient. So when you're in the gym and you're talking to these people who maybe can squat more than you or lift more than you, right? You're gaining wisdom. And I think that's so important because we can do it ourselves to what degree, right? Until we get hurt. And it might take us 5-10 years for us to get to that point when we can just ask for help. Touching base on what Antwaun said about people not showing up or seeing what he was doing as valuable. I mean, many people are going to be that roadblock in your life, and you just have to figure out how to get around it. I mean, I was a music teacher before coaching, so I did music and special ed. And when I was in music, there was always discussions year after year. We're going to have to cut the arts. We're going to have to cut the arts, right? So they're going to cut funding for something the kids love, that is helping the kids learn, be effective, stay out of the streets, right? Like all of these beneficial things for our kids. But guess what? There's no support from the administration, from the superintendent. I'm sure the kids would have been all for it. I might have not had 200. I might have had 50 out of 200. But I'm sure when the kids or the students, they see, oh, he's doing it, she's doing it, it's going to create a wave. And I think that's what has to start to happen more. It's because right now we are in a wave of turmoil rather than a wave of progression. Everyone's on their smartphones. Everyone needs this and that, the superficial things, right? That's what they're seeing. And I think it's very toxic for the minds of our youth because they're seeing the things that don't matter, right? They don't see mom and dad working together. They don't see grandma and grandpa getting a little older. They just look at themselves. And I mean, I'm a victim of it too. When I was a teenager, I only cared about my life. So I was growing up. What do I need? What do I need? What do I need? I didn't look at what my parents needed. I didn't look at what my grandparents needed. And it wasn't until my late 20s, early 30s that I saw my parents getting older. I saw my grandparents getting older. And I said, I need to be there for them. I need to be able to support them. And it didn't matter who supported me. I need to support them. And no matter what, I'm going to make sure that they're good. There's going to be times when you launch a program, you put out an episode, people don't listen to it, right? It could be SEO, or it could be maybe it's not vibing with them. But I can guarantee you that your work does not go unnoticed. If you keep on pushing, someone's going to pay attention one day.
I believe, to be honest with you, Michael and Ted, every week that I interact with kids, I'm reminded that my work matters. So I think my alluding to that was just on a larger scale, but every kid is a difference maker. Trust me, I give you a quick example. I just got a text last night from a kid, plays at another high school, is a junior in high school, about 40 miles away, comes in for private lessons every week, drives every week for an hour lesson, sometimes hour and a half lesson. This kid is a phenomenal athlete, and he's about 6'1", can get to the rim, can shoot. But his season, they've only won one game. He's averaging like 7 points a game. And I'm asking him, and I know you're the best player on the team, so what are you doing? And he goes, well, it's just, I said, well, hang on a second. I said, you should be averaging 15 to 20 points a game. He goes, oh, I can't get that many. I said, well, why can't you get 15 to 20 points a game? Because, well, that'd be ball hogging. That'd be being selfish. I said, well, let me help you out here a second. How many quarters are in a game? He said 4. I said, so how many times does 4 go into 20? He said 5. Can you score 5 points a quarter? He goes, yeah. I said, there's your 20 points. So he sends me a text last night. He was out for 2 weeks with a concussion, and we had a lesson. Scored 18 points and 11 rebounds last night, or night before last. So my point of going there is why it's important, and the kids listen. So I give this kid just some advice. He goes out and he performs. That is what's bigger than what I shared with you. And that's why I say I share it with you, not for that, like I'm upset about it. I'm learning from it. I just put more emphasis and effort in, what I'm kind of working with these kids. But to your point, it's inspirational, but it's also a teaching opportunity for me too, because this is a message I share with other people. And I tell kids all the time, everybody's not going to like what you do. Everybody's not going to support what you do. But as long as you believe in it, you stay true to that. Because I can tell you, if you told me you wanted to be an underwater basket weaver, I'd support you all the way through, right? I would buy whatever it is. I come watch you swim and make your little basket or whatever it is. As long as you know you have support, you follow what you do. And I follow my own advice. I'm just a little baffled sometimes, but you make a valid point, Michael. Not everybody wants to see everybody be successful. But when we talk about the next generation leaders, these are the people who are going to be taking care of the three of us. Well, you two, I might be long gone. But these are the people that are going to be taking care of you, not just physically, but we're talking about local government, state government, federal government. I mean, these people are going to be running this country. So how strong do we want them to be? We're talking about the masculinity of men and what it means to be a man. Well, when you had your panel of women, but what are they going to be like in 20, 30 years from now? And if they don't have the guidance, direction, or leadership, they're never going to be that. And I think that's what's so important about what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. We need to help our younger generation learn how to be effective leaders and be the leaders that they know they can be, rather than the people that they're just being groomed into, right? Our TikTokers, right? Oh, I can do a TikTok dance. I'm going to go eat some Tide Pods. I mean, yes, right? It's trending, right? You're going to get some views. And I think many people, they just get that misconception of what is appropriate. They don't realize that they're going to eventually be an adult one day, and they have to show up one day. It's not mom and dad is going to let me sleep in their basement all my entire life. It's not that. You're going to have to go out and you're going to have to be a man, or you have to go out and be a woman. You have to know what that means. It's not simply, oh, I'm doing what I was told or what I saw on MTV or whatever shows they're watching nowadays, right? We have so much technology in the world, and it's changing the way they learn, the way they think, and the way they are, I guess, introduced to certain ideas, concepts, relationships, sex, right? All of those, right? Like kids now, they are always smoking now, right? They're doing vapes and stuff like that. It's trending, right? Yeah. It's what they do, but they see it as, oh, this is what we do. This is what we're supposed to do, rather than, is this beneficial for me later? They only look at what's momentary, right? What is going to make me very happy today, rather than what's something I could work for toward the future. And I think that's why so many social medias, they use follow, not leader. I'm going to follow this person. I'm not going to lead. I'm going to be a follower. And that right there is a huge swipe on the mindset of kids, because they only learn how to be followers and not leaders. You asked some great questions, Antwaun, and I definitely appreciate all your wisdom in that. But I want to give Ted an opportunity to take over the hosting of this episode and ask some questions to us.
Michael, I appreciate that. And I think this is actually a perfect segue into some of the two topics I wrote down was priorities and people pleasing. And I think that's something that I don't know if we really touched on, but the priority aspect kind of goes well into what we were just touching on in terms of the development of these young boys and these young men in terms of, I think of what are the priorities at these different age groups, right? What are the priorities at 16 versus the priorities at 25? Because when I was 20, I'm never going to forget a supervisor of mine, an older man who poured some wisdom into me, said, Ted, what I wanted at 20 was not what I wanted at 25. What I wanted at 25 is not what I wanted at 30. And what I wanted at 30 is not what I want now at 35. I was 20 at the time. So he's 15 years my senior, trying to tell me, like, listen, your priorities are going to change. My experience was when I first got the job after taking ownership of my life and starting my career, my goal in my career was, oh, Good Morning America or go back to New York. I want to do the top of the top. Well, now I'm a decade in my career and that doesn't seem to be the priority anymore, right? Like I've met a girl along the way. I've gotten married along the way. I've made commitments to more so the decisions are based on what's good for family, not what's just good for my career, what's going to take me to the top. Sometimes advancement in career is good for my family, but sometimes it takes me far from my family. It takes me away from my family for long hours, right? So the way I look at things have changed throughout the years, and I'm interested to hear from you, Antwaun, maybe some of the priorities you see in some of the young men that you're coaching, and then as they get older, how priorities can change.
That's a great question. And as you were talking about it, and I knew you were going to turn it over at some point, I was going to get to respond. This happened about a year and a half ago. I had a panel discussion with a group of high school boys and girls, actually from 8th to 12th grade. And one of the questions I asked them was, who do you want leading the next generation of leaders? And the reason I asked the question, we talk about who's going to be providing them the information that they need. Surprisingly, they don't want people my age. They want people your age, Ted, to give them the guidance and leadership and direction that they want. But of course, they excluded me because I was present company. And then I was recording things, so they gave me my props. But no, it's interesting enough, as it was about 15 kids, and I would say 3/4 of them said that. And the reason I bring that up, it's about, if this is 20, they said somebody's just out of college, is basically what they said, 25 to 28. I said, well, that means that their direction, advice and direction they're going to get is going to be different than from somebody from me. So their priorities would change based on who provides them that guidance. The kids I work with now, everybody lives and dies by sports and social media. Sports and social media are everything. So if you ask them something, they're talking about, well, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And then social media, it's I'm going to do. And, you talk about followers and being followers and leaders. If they don't understand I ask kids, if you have followers that you follow, do you know anything about them? No. Well, they follow you. Well, if they're following, that's just it. That's just people clicking something. You know nothing about them, but you say they're following you, so you're making them validate who you are. So that's prioritizing popularity over substance. And that's something that over time is going to be detrimental to them because guess what? Those numbers are going to eventually start dropping because your interests are going to change and those numbers change and then things are going to go in a different direction. But prioritizing sports, education is not top of mind. Primarily, a lot of kids say, well, it's going to cost too much by the time I go and my parents can't afford it. And they say that. My parents can't afford it. So now they're not prioritizing education because they're thinking about their parents not being able to finance it, which we all know that there are multiple ways to get funding for college. I mean, it's not just loans or whatever. But anyway, my point I'm trying to make here is kids aren't educated enough about what they need to know and what they need to prioritize. And this is one of the things that I try to make sure they understand. Your education is important to you, so you need to prioritize your education. Your sports is a subsidiary of your education, and then your social environment should not supersede your athletics or your academics. Freshmen and sophomores spend more time on social activities and prioritize social activities over anything else. And so that's just my experience. And Michael, yours may be obviously would be different.
I want to say I was a teacher. We waste a lot of time in school. I'm going to say that. We waste a lot of time when we can have kids get mentors like yourself, Antwaun or Ted. They will learn years of information, maybe in 3 months, versus them sitting in the classroom for 10 months out of the year and they learn almost nothing. Ask a kid when they get home, what did they learn today? They're going to say, I don't know, because it's not meaningful to them. Yeah, they have to do some math and some reading, and eventually they're going to catch on to it. But we're not creating meaning anymore. We're reading basically a script. Teachers have their hands tied behind their back to curriculum. Not saying that we shouldn't follow the curriculum, because if we don't, then it's going to be opinion-based teaching. And that's even worse than curriculum-based teaching. I saw what was happening, and that's why I left teaching. I knew I could make a greater impact by simply just providing a podcast, putting out different types of material, different episodes, bringing out different coaches, different hosts, authors, because they have some wisdom that can be instilled into our youth, into any mind, to be honest. It doesn't matter about age, and they're going to have a benefit because of that. One of the reasons why I created this podcast is because it's like a legacy. It's like a legacy building thing. These episodes are always going to be there. As long as YouTube is there, as long as Getter, Gab, Twitter, as long as those social medias are going to stay present, the episodes will always be there. People can always go into iTunes and Spotify and they can see the episode or listen to the episode. That is legacy, because then they're going to have a curiosity. Well, what is a man, right? What is responsibility? What are my priorities, or what should my priorities be? Ted, you're completely right. Your priorities do change. When you're 10 to 15, your priorities might be sports. And then when you're 15 to 20, it might be girls if you're a boy. And you're 20 to 25, it might be college and career. 25 to 30, maybe the idea of settling down. 30 to 40 might be family, right? So it continually changes. And just looking at my life and all the ideas that I had and how many mindset shifts I had to continually make, life is not something that remains stagnant. We always have to remain flexible, and we always have to pivot when there's a change. I think many people don't have that ability to pivot. They just stay where they are. And even though they have different priorities, they just think about, well, it used to be this way. And then they get into dumps, basically. And then they just kind of fall into complacency and don't really push more in their life.
Two things. One, you were talking about priorities. I wanted to share one little thing about my priorities, how they shifted. When I started coaching, when I started coaching in high school, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be a Division I college coach. That's my passion, go up the ranks. So, I had the luxury of being an assistant coach at college. But as I got older, my priorities changed, and I realized I made more of an impact coaching younger kids than I did going up, because it was about the glory of being a Division I coach. That was what everybody aspired to. But as a coach, you realize I was making more of an impact with the younger generation. So that's where my priorities changed, and I'm glad they did. And I had to go through experiences to really reach that goal. But I just wanted to interject that.
That was perfect, though, Antwaun, because I was going to segue that into what do we want, right? Because a lot of priorities change because we realize what we want. Where I would say 25-year-old Ted might have the same want that 35-year-old Ted wants, right? I know at 25, I wanted to get married someday, have a nice family and all that. However, the way I was behaving did not match that. I was more interested in going out to the club, meeting girls and drinking too much, doing things that most guys in their young 20s do, right? But I said I wanted these things. I wasn't acting like that. Later on, as my realization of my priority became more evident, I understood that my behavior had to change over time. And I mentioned those priorities, and I leaned in a little bit to people pleasing, because I know a lot of us sometimes sit in something that we don't necessarily agree with too long. And when we realize what we want is something different, we are sometimes afraid to disappoint those who have an expectation of the said outcome that we committed to. We mentioned the importance of commitment and all that beforehand, and seeing through, like finishing what you start. But there are some times where you could be in a 5-10 year career, like Michael being in teaching and realizing, hold on, this is not what I want, right? My priorities and my behaviors are going to change because I'm realizing I became a teacher because I wanted to have impact, but I can't have impact the way that I want to. So I'm going to have to shift my behavior. Sometimes we see some guys that sit in that commitment, not pursuing what they want because of maybe a false sense of security, maybe because it's, quite frankly, it might be comfortable and easy. So I'm interested to hear some of your thoughts, and I'd love to hear what you think, Michael, in terms of how what we want isn't always evident in the behaviors that we have.
And is that like tied to people pleasing or just in the idea of our mentality?
I would say it's tied to not knowing what we want. We are people pleasing. We've pleased people so much that we've lost touch of what we want, right? Growing up in school, I was taught to sit down, keep your hands together, all that. So I'd like to touch a little bit on that, ignoring what we want because we're pleasing others.
I talk about this a lot on the podcast where imagination is stripped away from our young generations. Sit down, raise your hand if you want something. If you have to go to the bathroom, raise your hand. Don't speak out. Don't dance in class. Especially, I mean, this is bad if you're a kinesthetic learner, right? You have to move. These people are getting the shorthand where they're being shunned for who they are. So they say, well, I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to be reclused from the group. So we get that mentality of, well, I want to be a part of the tribe. I want to be a part of the class, right? I want to feel like I belong. And I think when that happens, that peer acceptance starts to take over because it is something that's entwined into our DNA where we need people to survive, right? A toddler just doesn't become an adult because they decided to, right? It was a guardian figure, a parent that said, I want this young child to be something, right? Or to be more. They fed them, they changed diapers, they cared for them. So there was someone that was there helping us. Well, we get to a point where we finally get to make a choice. We get to go off on our own, be a lone wolf, or we get to continue to be in a tribe, right? So what many people tend to do is they say, well, I want to be in a tribe. And so they look at what people are doing, right? Oh, they're doing this. Oh, they're doing that. Let me mimic it because being different is bad. So they are the same. So even if they have a different mentality, if they have a different idea, they're going to go along with the group, right? With the majority, because if they don't go along with the majority of people, they are now the minority. And now they're going to be maybe focused on, and they don't want to be focused on. So they want to people please. They want to do whatever is trending. That's why a trend is a trend. That's why people are in cliques, because they understand that if they are not in that tribe or in that community, they're going to, I guess, have that fear within them that they're not going to be anything in their life or that they are going to be in danger. And the brain has a very difficult time understanding, well, if Ted doesn't like me, then, like my life is going to be in turmoil. But in reality, it doesn't matter if Ted doesn't like me or not. It's just that I'm giving the perception of Ted liking me as me being able to survive. So the idea of people pleasing, I would rather please my group of peers and follow along with them than to be different. And I think that's where many of the kids in this generation are struggling, because they only see what is in front of them rather than what's in the future. Critical thinking, cause and effect, all of those things have to be looked at, because if they don't look at them, they're going to continue to people please. They're going to continue to follow the crowd, and they're going to find themselves in a place where they're unhappy. What do you think about that, Antwaun?
Totally 100% agree. And I have an example of exactly what you're saying. The aforementioned kids I was talking to, one of the questions I asked, I said, what is one of the biggest influences or one of the biggest challenges you have in school? Is it academics, sports, or is it your social interaction? There was a young lady who is now a senior, but at times she was a sophomore, and she admitted that following the crowd, pleasing her friends, she took courses her freshman, sophomore year just to be in class with her friends, as opposed to taking the courses that she needed to graduate. So it didn't take her until she started signing up for her classes for her junior year. She realized, holy crap, I got to decide whether I want to hang with my friends. Well, that was an easy decision. I got to go and do what's right for me. So the people pleasing went on for the first couple of years, and then she realized, hey, I got to break away from that, and I got to do that. But there's another aspect I think is really important to talk about too, is the people pleasing goes a different way, because if you think about kids wanting to stand out, individualism becomes an issue. And I speak specifically to sports in general, I'll say basketball, because I don't watch the NBA anymore because it's not a team sport. It's all about one player. Every team has a player, right? And it was developed as a team sport, should always be a team sport. Well, these kids are going out and they want to stand alone. Well, they may have their cliques that they play with, but when it comes to the structure and the team, there's always one player that wants to stand out and be different. And I think that has a negative connotation on the next generation, because now we can't be equals. Somebody's always got to be better. it may help competition, but it also hurts self-esteem and confidence in those kids that aren't able to compete at that same level. So that's just two examples from a social standpoint, and also an athletic standpoint. Back to you, Ted.
Yeah.
I sound like freaking newscaster. Back to you, Ted.
And I gotta have to like a 5-second pause, like a thanks, Antwaun. Yeah. No, this is phenomenal because, you know, it's something that I saw in myself with the people pleasing, and I read a lot of books, and a lot of that was, you know, instilled in me from my father. And I found answers to a lot of problems in life through books. And I've also found mirrors in books. One of which was the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. When I'm reading about the symptoms of a serial nice guy, and I'm like, okay, this is me, right? You alter your plans a little bit for others, or, you know, because you don't want to look bad amongst your friends. But you're right, Antwaun, in terms of the individualism. I don't want to just make noise to be the squeaky wheel in order to get the grease, right? I want to make sure that there's intentionality behind how I move. But a lot of it comes based on fear. And I do feel that, you know, there's a lot of young men out there who are terrified, man. They're terrified. They don't know what to do next. Maybe they don't realize how serious this thing is. And when I say this thing is this thing that's called life. And when I finally took it seriously, there's an oxymoronic approach to everything in life, right? Because you want to take yourself seriously, but you don't want to be too serious, right? You want to be able to control your emotions, but you don't want to bottle your emotions. There's all these balances that we need to handle, but we never pursue what that balance looks like because we're so afraid of dropping the ball. Or for those that are watching, like I have a cup in my hand, and a great example is if I hold this cup out in front of me for a couple seconds, there's no problem. But if I hold it in front of me all day, 24 hours, what happens? The cup gets heavy. And then eventually the cup falls and water spills out. Well, why did water spill? Someone says because you held it too long. Others would say because there was water in it in the first place. And you never addressed the water that was in the glass, right? We're held back because of fear, and we're afraid to take risks. So a concept I've been thinking about a lot for men, and it's kind of a dangerous kind of line to tote, but I'd be interested to know what Antwaun and Michael, what you guys think when it comes to risk and how that plays into the development of a young man's life or a young person's life when they're trying to figure exactly out who they are. Antwaun, I'd love for you to kind of kick things off with that thought process.
No, I think risks they are important. The younger you are, the more risks you should take because it's a learning process. Make decisions, right, wrong, or indifference, what I always tell kids, because put all your eggs in one basket doesn't work. Now you're back to square one. But if you experience a lot of different things, then you can take a little bit from what you like, what you didn't like, and, you know, you can kind of go there. But I think it's so important to do that. And also, I always tell kids, make a list of 3, 4, 5 things you want to do and then do them. You know, because you make a list, if you don't follow through with it, all you're doing is writing down something just because I said do it. But I challenged them to do it. And I said, don't tell me. Once you write it down, it's on you to do. Because, you know, you can have that accountability partner. But the fact that I say, don't check back with me, that means I better do it because he might ask me. So sometimes that reverse psychology. One other thing before I turn to Mike, I missed this earlier when we were talking about education. I want to make sure it's clear that, and I think the three of us are aware of this, our education system is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It is designed to have kids to come in at kindergarten and go through 12th grade to be worker bees when they get out of college. Because if you think about it, their critical thinking doesn't happen until kids get to college. And they have no experience of how to think for themselves until they get to college. And then they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So nobody taught them how to do that. So high school, middle school, and elementary is doing exactly what it's meant to be, and why it's so important for us to do what we're doing. I know that's not part of the question, but I just want to make sure I mention that for Michael.
You're right about the education system and critical thinking, all that. We can instill critical thinking at an early age. From first grade, we can even start. It's just that we don't do it, right? So it's up to the parents to have their kids think in a different way than most kids. But the problem with that is that eventually they're going to be ridiculed from the other people in the classroom, right? So do you want your child to go through maybe bullying, like maybe days they don't want to go to school because they're afraid that someone's going to pour glue in their hair? Like it could be anything, right? Because they're different, because they know they can do something, right? So they're not just those worker bees anymore. Ants, for example, if you just kind of getting to the idea of a foreign substance, right? In the hive or in the colony, if something is foreign, they attack it. They all go together and they attack it. So if we are not good worker bees and we're going against the status quo, we get attacked. So many people, again, going back to what Ted said earlier, are going to be people pleasers. I mean, I would rather have many students be critical thinkers and to be avant-garde and to, be the leaders that they can be. But in reality, it's a survival mechanism for them to just follow and please. So we do have to understand that. It's kind of like they have to lie to themselves or to the people around them if they can critically think, right? They just have to go, oh, okay, well, like you want to go to movies? Sure, we'll go to the movies. But at the same time, maybe they're listening to an audiobook because, now they have headphones that are real small. So they can be doing things, but oftentimes, again, they're just going to follow blindly. And we do have to understand that is where they are. As for risk is very important. Going off what Antwaun said, I believe the younger you are, you should have more risk. Think of finances, right? If you have $10,000 that you saved from all your birthdays, yeah, all on black, right? You're not even able to gamble yet, right? You have to be 21 to gamble. But if you're 18, right, you can invest. You can open up mutual funds. You can start to invest in stocks. And if you lose all of your money, you're only 18. So you can risk things. However, there's certain things you don't want to risk, right? Going to jail, getting stuff on your record, right? Juvie, things like that. That's not a good risk. Not saying that you shouldn't. Understanding the concept of family, right? So making sure you don't have children at a young age. But it doesn't matter about if you have children at a young age. It matters about who you have children with, right? So if you have a woman who has strong family values, maybe if the woman has both a mom and a dad in the picture, it's probably a good sign that she has a traditional type of mindset. But if she's maybe from a single mother household, it's going to be one of those things where, well, men ain't shit. Guess what? She's going to dump you along the way. So understand where your risk is, right? Understand risk tolerance. There's certain things you're going to want to risk at certain ages, and there's certain things you're not going to want to risk. Going to what Ted said, put it all on black. If you're 55, getting ready to retire, do not put it all on black, all right? You want to understand that, right? So in the beginning of life, take a lot of risk, but understand you don't want to do things that are so risky that you can't fix, right? We can always get $10,000 more. That's easy. But if we have kids at a young age, that's going to be a lifelong commitment, right? So especially if we have it with the wrong woman. So understand your risk tolerance, what type of risks you're taking. And then if you have questions about what risks you should be taking, get a mentor, talk to another man about it. Or if you're a woman, talk to another woman about it and ask questions. Because if you don't understand the consequences for your decisions, you're just going to keep on being in fear, the fear of failure, or you're just going to keep on making mistakes. And you're going to wonder why your life is this way. You get to make your own choices. You get to make a decision for the outcome of your future. It's just that we just leave everything up to happenstance or to our circumstances, and we wonder why we're not happy or we're not fulfilled. And it's not money. Money is not going to make you happy. It's something else. You have to find out what you're going to value and what is important to you today, tomorrow, and in the future.
I love it. Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. I always tell my wife, risk is a budget line. It's something you set yourself up for because, you got to be in it to win it. And a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines, not getting into the game. And it's not about being irresponsible. When I say risk is a budget line, it's because you take care of the bills first. You take care of your investments first. You take care of your needs first. And when everything's taken care of, with the little extra money you got, you could maybe put that in a little bit of a risk bucket, let that grow. And then when it accrues to a point where you can make that investment, where you could start that business, you could, open up that coffee shop, whatever it is that you might be holding on to, you can save, be patient, make sure you could do it at an appropriate time. My last question that I actually had written down was kind of all in the concept of where we went from the priorities, people pleasing, and taking risks. And a lot of it kind of goes into, at such a young age, and I noticed this amongst a lot of adolescents, and it is the necessity to belong. Sometimes belonging puts you in tribes that, quite frankly, might not be beneficial for you, right? There's a lot of importance in, finding your tribe, finding your people, finding your group, kind of like what Antwaun mentioned with the young girl who wanted to go to the class with her friends and everything. So I'd love to hear, and we could start with your thoughts, Antwaun, because I saw you were thinking about what I was mentioning with tribe. It was the tribe that we pick and the tribe that we choose to be a part of, how important it is. Because we talked about relationships, right? That's important, but also the tribe. because groupthink is real, it's influential, and it does have an impact on you, and you are the 5 people that you surround yourself with and beyond. So what are your thoughts on the concept of tribes in terms of some of the tribes you see your students joining and how it's had repercussions in their lives?
I'll start off by stating a quote that I say to them. I say, you show me your friends and I'm going to show you your future. I start with that because I tell them those are the people that you choose to be around, because those are people who are going to kind of define part of your future, not maybe now, but maybe later. I think the other challenge is not so much just being a part of a tribe, because some are just happy to be in it. But then there's also the next level. Are you satisfied with that tribe, or should you be looking for a tribe that more aligns with what you think and how you feel and how you act? And I think that's one of the things where some feel like they may be ostracized if they leave one, go to another, doesn't work out, can they go back? So I think there's that sense of confidence that comes in play, and the self-esteem. Hey, how confident am I in myself to leave this group, go to the next group, and then be able to go back? But it also goes back to what Michael was saying earlier about the critical thinking. You can teach it earlier, but you also can teach people, hey, before you commit to something, learn about it first. And that way, when you do select that tribe that you want to go with, that group you're going to hang out with, you're confident with that, but also have the resolve and the resiliency to say, hey, you know what? Not for me. I'm going to go with this next group. But I think the most important thing is understanding why you're connecting with a particular group of people. Michael, I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
I agree. For me, when I was listening to the question and listening to you speak, I was always just juggling tribe and relationship, because tribes are something that you can always change. I remember in high school, especially high school, I was with the nerds, I was with the sports kids, I was with the artistic kids. So I was with every different type of tribe. And for my senior year in the yearbook, it said most changed, because I was able to incorporate all the different mentalities from all the different groups of people. I just didn't stay with the basketball team, or I didn't stay with the soccer team. I was everywhere. I was a social butterfly. And I learned that you can drop a tribe, but you couldn't really drop a relationship. So the difference between the two, I might have made a relationship in a tribe. For example, let's say in the sports team, I cultivated a relationship with a few of the players and we became best friends, right? Just because I left the tribe of the team, it doesn't mean that that relationship was gone. So relationships have a longer lasting effect than if you just move from tribe to tribe. So tribes, to me, that I've learned, are temporary and they can be easily replaced. But the relationships that you cultivate in those tribes can be long lasting. So I would focus on, if you are in a tribe and you can't cultivate relationships, it's probably the wrong place to be. So you want to find a place where you have a sense of belonging and that you can see some growth happening, not only today, but for your future again, because the relationships that you build can be long lasting, right? I'm sure we all can think about high school and we could think about a good friend that we had in high school. That was a relationship. You're going to think about the relationship before you think about the group that they were in. The relationships last longer.
Absolutely.
No, I appreciate that clarification. It makes total sense, because you could, like I said, 1 or 2 people in a tribe, you can connect with more than the entire tribe. And then that's the relationship that you foster and grow in. Yeah, great point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes being in a number of tribes, those relationships that you cultivate in each of them become your own tribe, where I have fraternity brothers where I could say that tribe was not the most prosperous tribe for me, where I wanted to go in my future. But, there are 2 members of my fraternity who were standing next to me the day I got married. So they're part of my tribe. And I think we all kind of have our own tribe as we get older, right? Antwaun, you mentioned your circle getting smaller. That's your tribe getting closer, right? And you're more kind of understanding in where you're going. Your values probably line up. And what I've realized is, as I gotten older, to your point, Michael, yeah, my tribes have changed, but relationships have stood the test of time. And now I could look back and I say, okay, these are my guys. When I thought about the groomsmen, the people that were standing up there with me, I had friends from high school, friends from college, friends from afterwards, and friends in business, because in those different tribes, those relationships have solidified. They've become concrete. That's been some of the guys that I still keep near and dear to my heart today. And as I continue to grow and get older, they have the same mindset, they have the same values, and I hope that they continue to be part of my tribe for years to come.
I just wanted to mention something earlier, because this outdates both of you guys, and I think it's so relevant to, we're talking about the test of time. So my very first year coaching was in 1985. Okay, so I'm really aging myself. So I was 21 years old in 1985. My first team I coached was a group of 10-year-olds. So when I wrote my book, I reached out to all the players I coached over the years. So, hey, I'm writing a book. We'd love to get some testimonials. One of the testimonials came from a kid from that very first year. And this kid basically broke down his entire interpretation of that entire season. From the time I came in, who's this young guy and all the stuff like that. Said it was his best year of sports. And this almost 40 years later. So I want to just share that because the importance of, Michael, you're talking about relationships. Tribe was a team, but there's like 3 or 4 of us kids from that team. And Ted, you were talking about your wedding and having a couple guys from fraternity standing next to you. That's the kind of thing, and not having kids. That's a moment that I'll always treasure, that you made that kind of an impact 38 years ago. And it's something that reminds me of why it's so important with what I do.
Our conversation, has evolved from, the definition of a man to fatherhood to the concept of tribes and the relationships we cultivate and who we should have in our life, where it's a beginning and an end. But the end is not going to be the end of this episode because there's just so much more to teach. There's so much more to learn. And every single day we have an opportunity to learn. Every single day we have an opportunity to grow. I encourage everyone to continue to ask questions, deep questions, to become critical thinkers, to not be afraid, to not simply people please, to not simply look at people who are maybe toxic or, want to be in competition with them as something bad. Understand that in our life, we're going to have many moments for the first time. Sometimes we're going to have moments for the last time too. And it's very important that we understand those moments, both good and bad, the yin and the yang, right? Because we can't just have a life of all good. There's going to be many life lessons that we're going to learn. And we're going to say, I learned from that. I grew from that. And we might have said, oh, we had this person in our life. And maybe we thought that they were a great relationship. I can think about my high school sweetheart, right? Oh, I'm going to be together with them all my life. And then the relationship dissipates, right? What I thought was going to be my future was no longer my future. We have to be able to understand that what we have for ourselves in our mind might not come all the way through. That means we might envision something for our future, but it might not happen exactly how we envision. And I always say that you might be thinking about something or aiming at something and you might miss. But there's a lesson there, and we have to learn the lesson. And we have learned so many lessons from this episode today with Ted, Ralph, and Antwaun. So much wisdom, so much great content. It doesn't matter if you're a man or if you're a woman. You're going to understand that this episode can be listened to not just once, twice, but you can listen to this episode probably every single day this week, and you're going to learn something new. You're going to take away something different because your mentality, the state of your mind, is going to trigger something different. So it's important that you understand that we're always changing, that we're always growing, and that we always can make advancements. We just have to understand our mindset, and we have to understand who we have in our life. Not everyone is going to be the biggest cheerleaders on your team. Understand that. Create the tribe that you want. Cultivate the relationships that you need. And then you're going to start to see that your life can change for the better. So as we wrap up, I do want to get any final words from both of you. And then, of course, after you give your final words, tell the audience where they can find you. And let's start off with wisdom. We're going to start off with Antwaun. Big Unk.
Oh, easy. I like he said that. By the way, you're probably going to have to edit this out, so I'm going to pause before I say this. So you said you could listen to this once or twice, and I had to, man. This is old school. I was about to say 3 times the lady, Commodores, but I'm like, okay, you guys may not get that. Y'all don't know that song.
I'm not going to edit it out. It's staying in here now.
Leave it in.
And I know that song because what we listened to growing up. I'm actually doing an experiment with my son. I believe that music is the key to changing the way the next generation can learn and think. So the music that he listens to actually is only jazz and like Earth, Wind & Fire, Bee Gees, Kool and the Gang, like that type of music, because that's what I grew up with. So I'm just trying to replicate the good areas in my life growing up and then give it to him so I have a good understanding where his mindset is. Because if you understand what music does to the brain, it actually helps form it. for me, growing up with that music, I know the mentality of how my brain formed. So I'm just going to adjust here and there for him. And then he's going to be in a better place than where I was.
I like you even more now, Michael. I didn't like you too much. I love you now, man. Love you now. So my words of wisdom, really, to be honest with you, I think everything we've talked about today is so important. But when I bring everything together and I say what I do is with kids, but I think it goes along for everybody that's listening to this, young, old, male, female, is attitude dictates a lot of relationship building. Attitude dictates a lot of communication. And for me, it's a big word for me. And I'll just share a quote of mine that I love is, positive attitude won't solve all your problems, but it will annoy enough people to make it worth the effort. So that's what I always tell people, and that's why I always stay positive, because whatever you're going on in your life, your attitude will always help you overcome that, either in short time or over a longer period of time. A little bit of how to contact me, CoachTsCorner.com is my website. All of my contact information is there. And also you can go to Amazon and get my book, The Ultimate Guide to Success for Preteens and Teens. And I also just launched my Success Academy, which is an online academy where courses are available in 3 formats: video, audio, and ebook version. So based on it's the universal design, learning design. So it's available for preteens and teens, and that's available on my website as well. And Michael, I want to thank you again for this gracious invitation. This has been an amazing experience. And with Ralph and also Ted, I want to thank you. And it's great to know that we are neighbors, and look forward to us staying connected and hopefully meet and have for coffee or waffles or whatever it is you eat. I don't know what you eat.
I'm down for all of it. I appreciate that. I would say in closing, first, Michael, thank you. And it's been an honor to be really amongst you, Ralph, and Antwaun. I think what just happened in the past 2 hours is really what I hope to see more of, because a lot of guys are lonely. A lot of guys don't have these conversations with other men. And what we're doing doesn't necessarily solve any problem in someone's individual life, but it puts the spark, it puts the first step and the seed for prosperity and growth. So I would say for anyone who came through these past 2 hours and sat down and received the value, you're already in control of your life, and you're already farther than you might think that you are. I think a lot of us are so hard on ourselves. We have the negative self-talk, and a lot of the things that we talked about in the past 2 hours really came down to self-worth, vision, execution, and growth. And then we talk a lot about that for when it comes to being a modern man. We talk a lot about that when we pour into others. At the end of the day, being able to sit with you three today has filled my cup up. It's filled me with energy. It's reminded me of how much work I need to do, but also that I'm on the right path and going in the right direction. And I want a lot of people, anyone listening, anyone watching in any form, to pay attention to the energy that they get in the environments that they're in, because that's God's way of telling you if you're going in the right direction or not. And I think what just happened in the past 2 hours was, for me, a reminder that I am going in the right direction, that anyone that wants to head in the right direction, you just heard 4 guys that are open and willing. I encourage you to contact Ralph, Michael, Antwaun, follow what they're doing. Grow with them, get the value from these men, because I wrote down a full page of notes these past 2 hours.
Same here.
And for anyone who might be resonating with some of the things that I've said, first, I appreciate it. Second, you could find me, as I mentioned earlier, at themodernmanpodcast.com, Instagram at themodernmanpodcast, and also just opened up a mastermind group because, again, the vision is connecting men in pursuit of their potential. For anyone who is ready and willing for a financial commitment of $50 a month, I'm building a group of men having conversations just like these, access to each other through the app Discord, and really honing into making these conversations mainstream, which I think can help a man in the household, which could help a community, which can help a city, a state, and eventually the country and the world. So it starts with us. It starts with the mirror. And I'm working on being my best self, and I encourage everybody else to do the same.
Yeah, and this episode has been extremely uplifting for myself too. And I do want you both to know, and I'm sure Ralph is going to hear this also, is I'm very selective in who I have on the podcast, especially now. I get so many inquiries for people wanting to be guests on the podcast, and I record so many episodes that never air, and I mean it. And I will tell them before, I have a disclaimer now on my podcast page. You can record an episode with me, but it doesn't mean it's going to air. People have to know that what I'm putting out, it has to have some type of content, it has some type of meaning. And the conversation that we had today was meaningful, had so many nuggets of wisdom. And the gentleman that I had on this podcast episode, well vetted, not only from our individual interviews, but I knew that they can come together in a group with a collective mindset to help people think in a different way, to think more positive, and to spark some initiative, especially into the young hearts of men, because men are always going to look for another man, whether it be positive or negative. I tell people that all the time. I would rather give a young man a positive role model than a negative role model, because they're going to go so much further with a positive role model than a negative role model. So I want to thank you, Ted. Thank you, Antwaun. And Ralph, who's not here, I want to thank you too. All right, everyone, I would like to thank you all for watching the second episode of the group edition of the podcast. As you can see, the gentlemen we had on the podcast are going to be a great asset in any man's corner. So I encourage you to learn more about them, and I encourage you to continue to follow these gentlemen, Antwaun Thompson, Ted Phaeton, and Ralph Grace Jr.